Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for tuning in to the National Fraternal Order of Police Labor Services Division podcast series on labor issues, sponsored by the Labor Services Division and inspired by National Fraternal Order Police President Patrick Yos. My name is Michael Coviello. I am the Associate General Counsel for the Division of Labor Services of the National Fraternal Order of Police. I've been practicing law for over 30 years, and over 25 of those years have been in some capacity representing FOP members. First, as a contract attorney on the legal defense plan representing officers involved in critical incidents, as the General Counsel for the Florida State Lodge, and now as Associate General Counsel for the Division of Labor Services.
Good morning. My name is Steve Egan. I'm a labor specialist with the Fraternal Order of Police. I worked in law enforcement for over 24 years. I retired at the rank of lieutenant, supervising the training division and our active shooter use of force program. Prior to that, I was a shift commander for several years, as well as supervising our detective unit. I'm a use of force instructor, a firearms instructor, and I'm certified by the Force Science Institute as an advanced specialist.
Today we are talking about how do you become organized. In other words, how do you become a union, join a union, et cetera. And for FOP members all across the country, it can be a little bit different, which we'll point out some of the little details along the way. And with me here today is Steve. And Steve is going to play the role of the curious police officer who wants to join a union. So why don't we just jump right in, Steve?
So it's great being back with you again. Tell me about, let's pretend I'm a cop that knows nothing about a union. How do I become a union?
Okay. Well, first of all, one of the things I'd have to ask you is, why are you curious? What is it that you're interested in? What's going on in your agency?
I'm probably typically pissed off about wages, benefits, overall working conditions, fairness, objectivity, with regards to grievances.
Okay. So that's typically what we hear. Either somebody has gotten a raw deal in a disciplinary process that they believe was unfair, or their promotional process doesn't necessarily include everybody. There's some favoritism going on. A lot of times what we find out is, you might be in town A and literally right next door at town B, they're making $5 to $10 an hour more than you. They have take-home cars. Their grievance or disciplinary process is very just and fair. Everybody's got an equal shot at promotions. They have a process in place. Could be any one of a number of things. And you'd be surprised. Take-home cars tends to be a big deal. So what we'll do is we'll find out kind of what's going on for you. And then one of the things that we do is we start to first immediately look at what is the state process. Collective bargaining for public employees, firefighters, teachers, police officers, is controlled by state law, and the whole process is laid out in state law and state regulation. So if you happen to be in what we call a collective bargaining state, well, the first thing we do is you go right to the statutes. What is required? Typically what's required is interest, right? Enough people have to be interested in forming the union because it is something that is 100% at the ground level. It has to start there. So you as a leader in this thought decide to come to the FOP in this case. We will then have a meeting. We'll talk to people, and here's what a union looks like. And all kinds of questions get asked. Does this mean I'll never be able to talk to the chief again? No, it doesn't. This does not mean that there's going to be any interruption in the administration of the agency. It doesn't mean that you can't the agencies say this a lot. Oh, if that police officer that you're on the street with that you don't like and you don't trust, well, we'll never be able to get rid of them. That's not true either. It's about putting a process in place that's fair and impartial so that it's not based on favoritism, but based upon actual merit. And so things like that. And so we answer those questions. And when enough people are interested, there's a petition process. And two things that we have to take a look at. The first one is who's going to be in the union, what we call a bargaining unit. Right? Now, a bargaining unit could be all the patrol officers, the corporals, and the sergeants. It could be just the patrol officers up to corporal. All kinds of different, what they call communities or community of interest. Basically, what we're looking at is employees that do the same or similar job under the same infrastructure, same pensions, same rules, same policies, have the same authority, which is why sometimes sergeants and lieutenants are in separate units. Once we figure that out, what we do is we then have interest cards, they're called. The laws require a showing of interest to be filed. Now, you are clearly interested because you came to me, right? So what we want to find is how many other people are interested, meaning how many will actually participate in the election process, because there is an election in this. So what happens is we do the showing of interest required by statutes, and in most cases, it's 30%. If 30% of the proposed bargaining unit are willing to participate in the election, then you have enough interest to file that petition. And the petitions are available on state websites, and their forms that they prefer that you use, et cetera. Just about every state has its own forms that are available online. What we like to do as the FOP, we like to ensure that we're going to win. Right? We want to make sure when we go in, we're going to invest the time and the energy to create this process. We want to make sure that we have a better than even chance of winning. So we want to see 70% of the proposed bargaining units sign those cards. And they literally are cards. They're literally like index cards that say, I would like to have the Fraternal Order of Police as my bargaining agent for collective bargaining with my employer. Very simple. Then what we do is we submit the petition with those cards. The labor board then goes to the employer, and the employer provides a roster that they do a check. The labor board will look at all the names on the roster up against the names of the people's names on the interest cards, and in some cases, they'll actually do a signature verification. Once that's done, a date will be set for the election. Now, it seems real easy, right? It seems a big deal, right? Except every now and then an employer might come along and say, hey, you know what? We don't think that sergeants should be in this bargaining unit because they're supervisors. Well, then either we will agree that they can be in a separate bargaining unit, or if the employer is taking a position that sergeants can't bargain at all, they're not entitled to collective bargaining, then we may actually have a hearing before the labor board, and the employer has to show why the sergeant or lieutenant or whatever rank it is excluded by law from bargaining. And those hearings can be pretty intense, and they can sometimes go all the way through the court process. Once the labor board's done, it can get kind of complicated. But the bottom line is what we're looking for is to create a bargaining unit that will be certified by the labor board and has a community of interest, is what we call it, a community of interest. So once we have that, then we have an election. When the election takes place, everybody has a secret ballot, and they will have a choice between the FOP or the employer, or in other words, no union. So the vote against union, and not everybody has to vote. They're not required to vote. What's interesting is if another union comes along and says, hey, you know what? Now that we're aware that this unit is willing to look into being unionized, we want to participate. We want to be the union. And what's kind of interesting about that is they only need 10% of the bargaining unit members.
That's it? 10%?
10%. It seems kind of silly. We do all the work. We get 70%. They come along. They get 10%, and they're on the ballot. Now it's a three-way race. And it's just like any other election. You know, there's meetings, there's campaign events and all kinds of stuff. You know, free pizza and beer. Come, listen to a presentation kind of thing. And then when the election happens, there has to be 50% plus one of the people who vote in order for it. So not everybody gets counted if they choose not to vote. However, it's 50% plus one of the people who voted. Some states, and it's mostly in the Midwest, it's 50% plus one of the number of the people in the bargaining unit. So it does matter that people choose not to vote, but that's very rare. Once that's done, the votes are counted. Now, the union that wins, the FOP, of course, is certified as the bargaining agent, it's called, or the exclusive bargaining representative of that bargaining unit. So that's just the very beginning of the process. How long can that take? I've seen it take place in 2 or 3 months. I've seen it take place over a year or more, especially if there's a challenge by the employer. So what are you hearing?
I'm hearing let's join FOP.
It can be kind of an extensive process. But the great part of this is once this is done, you now have a sense of what it is that people really want. And because that's important, because the next step in the process is putting the employer on notice that you want to bargain a contract, and if you've been paying attention, you're pretty well aware of what the people in the bargaining unit want. We're going to do another session where we're going to talk about preparing for bargaining and what contract proposals can look like, but this is basically the process. Now, it's not the only way that this happens. There are oftentimes bargaining units that are already formed. They're already being represented by another organization, and the members are dissatisfied with that organization because either they're not getting the contracts they want, or they're not being attentive to grievances to be filed, whatever reason. In that instance, it's called a decertification. To decertify a union, a member of the bargaining unit is responsible for filing the petition. And when you think about it, it makes sense. Another another labor organization or union cannot file a decertification petition against an existing union. Can you see how that could cause some real conflict and some disruption, basically, in the bargaining unit? Well, what has to happen is the bargaining unit members themselves would file that petition. And it's the same process. 30% or more of the cards signed and a petition filed. Some states, you can decertify and then immediately turn around and file a petition for another organization, come in and file a petition to represent that now open unit. That is most likely not the case where most people live, because typically what it is you file the decertification petition and then immediately file the representation petition, so both issues are decided in one shot in one election. The reason why it's really careful to pay attention to this, Steve, is that there are some states that have statutes that say you can only have one labor election per 12 months. So if you're not careful enough and you don't file that representation petition simultaneously with the decertification petition, people will go unrepresented for an entire year. Now, there's also, when you're doing a decertification petition, it's what's called a window period. Mm-hmm. Now, a window period means that there's a period of time before an existing contract negotiated by another bargaining agent or union expires that you can actually come in. You can't do it too soon and you can't do it too late. Or you have to wait until the existing contract expires. But that's basically what they call the window period. Do you have any other questions about how this process looks or works?
No, it's been straightforward.
Pretty straightforward. Well, that's a compliment for a lawyer to hear that he said something straightforward, first of all, which reminds me, by the way, you do not have to be an attorney to do this process at all. As I said, almost every collective bargaining state has these forms online, and a lot of it is driven by non-lawyers. Now, what role does the FOP play? You've been involved in this process a lot lately. What's the role that you play as an FOP representative in this process, supporting members that either want to get organized for the first time or change from their existing union into the FOP? What does that look like for you lately?
So, number one, it's expressing why I believe and why cops should come to the FOP and what the FOP stands for. But secondly, to every point that you just made, to ensure that they meet that window. And again, you don't need to be a lawyer to file these petitions, but you do need to follow the guidelines, and you have to get it in within the window of time period. You have to make sure you have the people that, in fact, are signing the interest cards and you're getting out there to vote, essentially, and making people understand that you have to follow through. It's not just, hey, I want to join the FOP. It's you have to get the petition in, you have to get the interest cards in, and then the day of the election, you have to show up and get that vote in.
How often do you hold these organizational meetings? And let's say it's an average size department of about 150 to 200 officers. How often do you have these? Where do you have them? How does that work?
Typically, it's been at the police department where folks work. Sometimes they'll have them off site, but generally speaking, it's at the employer's presence, and it's usually consistent. Obviously, police, we work shift work. It's at a time that's consistent with trying to get the majority of the individuals there. So at the end of the day shift, second shift's coming on board. Okay,
and if you have a 3-shift rotation, you're there 3 times throughout the course of a day, sometimes 1 o'clock in the morning.
Absolutely. You can absolutely make the offer to be there. And, now with the advent of Zoom, if need be, if for whatever reason there's that issue where you just can't be there, I'm more than willing to do that as well.
Okay. So what role do local members play in this? Is this just all National comes in and takes care of it, or what role does the individual officer in their local organization, maybe even an existing law union president or other officer, play in this process once the FOP gets involved?
They play the predominant role because they're the ones signing the petition to decertify if that's in fact the case, ensuring that they're getting the interest card signed. So they're playing that role particularly. They're playing the role with regards to setting up later on down the road if you're coming on as a social law, it's constitutions and bylaws and that sort of thing. Having people play the role of the treasurer, union president. So it's a boots on the ground driven purpose. National's coming in after the fact on the labor services agreement, and once everything's been certified, to now make the agreement of how we're going to represent you.
Oh, great. Okay, so basically it's self-determination. They tell us what they want. We will help them through the nuts and bolts and the procedural hurdles. And then once they get certified, they still are in a decision-making process. Do they want to do it on their own, or they want the Division of Labor Services to come in and help them?
Yep.
Great. Yeah. And as many people already know, the Division of Labor Services exists through the National Fraternal Order Police. We will come in under a service agreement, and we will do all of the things that you are required to do as a labor union in your name. We don't take over. We don't throw out your elected officers. It's still self-determination. It's just we provide that service so that you can focus on other things, learn how to do it along the way, and we'll play as big or as small a role as you want. And basically, once you pay that monthly fee per member, there are no other additional costs at all. We will cover any expert witness fees. We'll help prepare bargaining proposals. If you need to have a forensic analysis done of the employer's books and records, we will do that. If it goes to arbitration, we will cover all the costs of arbitration, not for another penny other than that monthly fee per member. It's not a bad deal.
It's not at all, and that's really the driving point at the local level. It's the strength in numbers, the 377,000 strong, the power that FOP has nationally, and then when you get into the labor services component, the power that you have in the we like to call it the financial autopsy, or attaching the attorney at arbitration. And again, there's no additional cost, where other unions sometimes you have to pay a little extra. So, and
the big bonus for many, if you join us with a service agreement, that monthly fee includes the National Legal Defense Plan, which it's like going out and having all multiple layers of insurance and protection and coverage that you can possibly get. Not having it is sort of like going out of your house naked and trying to drive down the street in a car that's uninsured. You're going to get exposed, you're going to get hurt, and there's not going to be much of a safety net there. So
this day and age, you'd be crazy to go out without the legal defense plan.
All right. Well, that's what we have for you today, Steve. Thanks very much. I appreciate it. In our next screen that comes up, you're going to see how you can get in touch with us if you want some more information. We'll look forward to talking to you and see you on the next cast.